the silent theatre of the mind, a story is always playing. Even now, in the stillness, you can feel it, the subtle shift of scenery, the entrance and exit of characters, the low murmur of a half-forgotten script. This inner world is more real to us than the one outside. It is the landscape we inhabit from birth until death, the architecture of our joy and our sorrow. For most, this inner stage is a place of constant, low-grade conflict. It is a battlefield of duty versus desire, of past regrets warring with future fears. But it was not designed to be a place of war. At its core, your consciousness, your fundamental awareness, is a place of profound stillness. It is not a stage for endless drama, but a home. Imagine this inner home. See it not as a structure of wood and stone, but as a space of pure being. There is a quality of light inside that is unique to you. There is a silence that holds the echo of your deepest wisdom. In this home, you are not the frantic actor, but the calm, abiding presence that owns the space. This is your birthright, a sanctuary of peace within. But then, there is a knock at the door. It is not a polite rap. It is a sudden, urgent pounding that rattles the frame. Or perhaps it is more subtle. A slow turning of the knob, the creak of a floorboard in an empty hall, a shadow that falls across the room where there was only light a moment before. A visitor has arrived. It is uninvited. It carries with it a chill, a feeling of contraction, a sudden, sharp scent of alarm. The mind's immediate, ancient impulse is to react. The ego, the vigilant groundskeeper of this inner home, rushes to the door. It peers through the peephole and sees a fearsome shape. Its first thought is defense. Bar the door, it shouts. Pretend no one is home. Brace the windows. This intruder cannot be allowed inside. And so the struggle begins. The once peaceful home becomes a fortress under siege. The furniture is pushed against the doors. The lights are turned off, and the silent inhabitant huddles in a corner, listening to the relentless pounding from outside. All energy is now consumed by resistance, by the desperate effort to keep the visitor out. The home is no longer a sanctuary. It is a prison, and its warden is fear. You know this feeling intimately. You have felt the arrival of this guest. It may announce itself as a tightness in your chest before an important meeting, a racing heart in the middle of the night, or a persistent, nameless dread that colors an otherwise beautiful day. You have felt your own mind barricade the doors. You have exhausted yourself trying to fight it, to argue with it, to rationalize it away, only to find it growing stronger, its knocking more insistent. In your attempt to deny it entry, you have given it all of your attention. You have made it the central event, the most important thing that is happening. You have unknowingly surrendered the peace of your home to the chaos of resisting what is already at the door. But what if there was another way? What if the wisdom of the ages does not teach us to be better fighters, but to be wiser hosts? A wise host does not panic at the sound of knocking. They do not immediately declare war. They also do not throw the door wide open and invite the stranger to take the master bedroom. Instead, with a calm, grounded presence, they simply go to the door. They open it just enough. They do not identify with the visitor. They do not become the visitor. They simply observe it. They ask, not with fear, but with a detached curiosity. Who are you? What is your purpose here? This is the beginning of freedom. It is the subtle but profound shift from "I am anxious" to "a feeling of anxiety is here, visiting." In that space between the "I" and the anxiety, the entire home of your being can begin to breathe again. You are no longer the feeling. You are the space in which the feeling is occurring. This journey we are embarking on together is an exploration of that space. It is the practice of becoming a wise and compassionate host to every thought, every emotion, every sensation that arrives at your door. It is not a method for eliminating unwanted guests forever, for the nature of life is to send a variety of visitors. It is, instead, a way to cultivate an inner home so spacious, so deeply rooted in peace, that no guest, no matter how loud or disruptive, can ever truly threaten its foundation. The guest is a visitor. It is not, and never can be, your home. So now, as this understanding settles, find your comfortable space. Let the body soften and release. Let the outer world, with all its demands and noises, fade into the distant background, and allow this journey into the quiet, spacious home of your own being to begin. The visitor who knocks upon the door of your mind rarely comes alone. It brings with it an atmosphere, a climate that can change the entire feeling of your inner home. A guest of anger can make the air feel hot and electric. A guest of sorrow can bring a cold, persistent dampness that seems to seep into the walls. We call this a mood. A person says, "I am in a terrible mood today," as if it were a room from which they cannot escape. They believe they are trapped inside this weather, but the wisdom traditions offer a different perspective. They suggest that you are not the weather, but the sky in which the weather occurs. There is an old story of a young novice in a monastery, a boy of no more than 18, who was plagued by a mind he could not control. One day, he would be filled with ecstatic joy, his thoughts bright and clear as a summer morning. The next, a storm of despair would descend, and he would be lost in a fog of self-doubt and fear so thick he could barely meditate. He sought out the oldest monk in the monastery, a man who had sat in silence for 60 years, whose face was as calm and creased as ancient parchment. The boy, agitated and near tears, poured out his troubles. "My mind is my enemy," he said. "It is a wild beast. One day it loves me, the next it tries to kill me. How can I ever find peace when it is so violent and unpredictable?" The old monk listened without a single word, his gaze fixed on a point far beyond the boy. When the torrent of words had ceased, the old man simply raised one finger and pointed to the sky. It was a day of shifting winds. Great, billowing white clouds drifted lazily across a vast blue expanse, their shapes morphing from dragons to mountains to castles in a matter of moments. As they watched, a dark mass began to gather on the horizon, a bruised purple storm front that swiftly moved in, swallowing the blue and casting a deep shadow over the mountainside. A cool wind kicked up, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The young novice instinctively tensed, ready to complain about this new misfortune. But the old monk remained perfectly still, a faint smile on his lips. They sat together as the rain fell, and just as quickly as it had arrived, the storm blew past them. The sun emerged once more, brighter now, illuminating a world washed clean. The final dark wisps of cloud dissolved into the brilliant blue. The old monk lowered his finger. "The sky does not fight the clouds," he said. and said no more. This is the core teaching of impermanence. Your awareness, your true self, is the sky, vast, open, luminous, and always present. Your thoughts, emotions, moods, and sensations are the clouds. They are transient meteorological events. They arise, they gather, they shift and change, and they pass away. Not a single cloud has ever permanently stained the sky. Not a single storm has ever broken it. The fundamental error of the human mind, the primary source of its suffering, is that it forgets it is the sky and believes it is the cloud. When a dark cloud of sadness appears, the mind says, "I am sad." It contracts around the feeling, identifies with it, becomes it. When a turbulent storm of anxiety blows through, it says, "I am anxious." It mistakes a temporary weather pattern for its entire climate, its very identity. Consider how this plays out in a modern life. A person wakes up. For no discernible reason, a feeling of heaviness is present. A grey, formless melancholy hangs in the air of their mind. The untrained ego cannot tolerate a feeling without a story. It immediately becomes a detective, searching for a cause, a culprit. "Why do I feel this way?" it demands. It rewinds the tape of yesterday. "It must be that comment my boss made." It fast forwards to tomorrow. "It's because I have that difficult task to do." The mind finds a reason, and in finding a reason, it gives the cloud a hook, an anchor. It pours conceptual concrete around a fleeting wisp of feeling, turning it into a solid monument of a problem. A passing morning fog is transformed into a day-long narrative of a bad day, and every subsequent event is interpreted through this dark lens. The practice, then, is to become the wise meteorologist of your own mind. It is to do as the old monk did, to simply watch. When you awaken to that blanket of melancholy, the invitation is to resist the urge to diagnose it. Instead, simply note it. There is a feeling of heaviness here this morning. Feel its texture without needing to know its origin. Notice its temperature, its weight, as a simple, impersonal phenomenon. In doing this, you are stepping out of the cloud and remembering that you are the sky. You create a space of awareness around the feeling. You are no longer the frightened villager, running from the storm. You are the mountain that feels the wind and the rain, yet remains unshakably itself. You are the sky that allows the darkest storm to pass, knowing that the sun, your own innate luminosity, has not gone anywhere. It is simply, for a moment, obscured. This acceptance is not passive resignation. It is an act of profound wisdom and strength. It is the understanding that all things, all feelings, all visitors shall pass. The passing weather of the mind is a universal human experience. No one is immune to the gathering of clouds or the sudden storm. Yet, a mystery remains. Why does the same cloud of disappointment cast a fleeting shadow over one person, while for another, it becomes a week of darkness? Why can one person walk through a field of criticism and feel only a few stinging nettles, while another feels poisoned by a single barb? The difference lies not in the nature of the weather, but in the vastness of the landscape it passes over. A thunderstorm that is a cataclysm in a narrow canyon is but a dramatic spectacle over a boundless ocean. A young man, burdened by a life of ceaseless hardship, came to a spiritual master. He complained day and night about his suffering. Every word he spoke was a testament to his pain. a catalogue of his misfortunes. One morning, the master, tired of the complaints, looked at him and said, "Fetch me a glass of water and a handful of salt." The young man obeyed. The master then instructed him, "Take 1 spoonful of this salt, put it into the glass of water, and drink it." The young man did as he was told, and immediately spat the water out, his face contorted with disgust. "It is bitter," he coughed. "It is unbearable." The master nodded, a gentle light in his eyes. "Now," he said, "take the same spoonful of salt. Follow me." He led the young man from the small room to the edge of a great, crystal-clear lake, its surface shimmering under the morning sun. "Throw the spoonful of salt into this lake," the master commanded. The young man tossed the salt into the water, where it vanished without a trace. "Now," said the master, "cup your hands and drink from the lake." The student drank the cool, fresh water. "How does it taste?" the master asked. "It tastes pure," the young man replied. "It is refreshing." The master sat beside him on the shore. "The pain of life," he said softly, "is pure salt. It does not change. But the bitterness we taste depends entirely on the vessel into which it is thrown. When you are in pain, the only thing you can do is to enlarge your sense of things. Stop being a glass. Become a lake." This simple story holds one of the most profound secrets to human freedom. The glass of water is the ego. It is the small, constricted self, the me that is defined by its personal history, its collection of titles, wounds, and ambitions. The ego is a tight, cramped container. When the salt of pain, a failure, a rejection, a loss is dropped into it, the water becomes saturated with bitterness. The ego's awareness shrinks to the size of the problem. The entire universe becomes that insult, that fear, that ache. The person's whole identity is consumed by the suffering, because the vessel of their consciousness is too small to hold it. This is the state of ordinary, unexamined suffering. The lake, on the other hand, is the state of pure, expansive awareness. It is the consciousness that is not limited to a personal story. It is the part of you that is connected to the sky, the trees, the earth, and the silent, pulsing rhythm of life itself. When you learn to rest in this awareness, you are no longer a fragile glass. You become the lake. The sword of pain may still be dropped into your life. It is, after all, the nature of things. But it dissolves into a vastness so great that its bitterness is neutralized. The pain is not denied or ignored, but it is held in a container so immense that it cannot poison the whole. The goal of a spiritual path is not to magically eliminate all the salt from the world. It is to learn through practice how to become the lake. You see this dynamic play out in the digital landscapes of modern life. A person is lying in bed, scrolling through a feed of curated perfection. They see an announcement of a colleague's promotion, a picture of a friend's idyllic vacation, a story of someone else's seemingly effortless success. In that instant, a spoonful of salt, the salt of comparison, of envy, of feeling left behind, is dropped into their consciousness. If their awareness is a teacup, the effect is immediate and toxic. Their own life, with all its complexities, joys, and hidden triumphs, suddenly feels worthless. The vast world of their own being contracts into that single bitter data point. In that moment, they have forgotten they are a lake. and have chosen to become a tiny, poisoned glass of water. The moment you feel that sharp, contracting sting of inadequacy or jealousy is a sacred signal. It is an alarm bell, ringing to tell you your vessel has become small. The practice is not to argue with the feeling or to shame yourself for it. The practice is to consciously and deliberately enlarge the vessel. Put the phone down. Feel the weight of your own body, here, now. Feel your feet on the ground. Listen to the hum of the refrigerator or the sound of distant traffic. Take one deep breath and follow it all the way in and all the way out. You are reminding yourself that you are infinitely more than this one passing feeling. You are the silent, aware presence that is noticing the feeling. With each conscious breath, you are pouring the contents of the tiny glass into the great, calm lake of your own being. The salt is still there, but it is dissolving now, held in the compassionate embrace of a much larger reality. To become a lake is to understand that a body of water is not a static thing. It is a living system, fed by currents, shaped by the land, responsive to the pull of the moon. The peace of the lake is not a rigid, frozen peace. It is a fluid, dynamic peace that understands the nature of flow. Much of human anxiety comes from a deep misunderstanding of this principle. The mind believes it is a general on a battlefield, able to command the forces of reality. But the wise know that we are not generals, but sailors on a great and powerful river. Imagine two men who must journey to a village downstream. The river before them is wide and strong, its current swirling with an energy that is both beautiful and intimidating. The first man is a man of great impatience and ego. He looks at the river's meandering path and decides it is inefficient. He believes his own will is stronger than the water. He wades into the current, plants his feet, and begins to push. He tries to force the river into a straighter channel, to make it flow faster. He throws his entire body against the immense, indifferent weight of the water. His muscles burn. His breath comes in ragged gasps, and sweat mingles with the river spray on his face. He's exhausted, enraged, and utterly defeated, having moved not a single inch from where he started. He has declared war on reality, and reality always wins. The second man, a man of quiet observation, sits on the bank and watches the river for a long time. He does not see an adversary. He sees a partner. He notes the direction of the strongest currents. He sees how the water gracefully parts around a great stone. He feels the power in its flow and knows that this power can be either an obstacle or an engine. He spends his morning not fighting the river, but gathering what the river and the forest have offered. Fallen branches, sturdy vines. He methodically lashes them together, constructing a small but solid raft. He then slides his craft into the water, climbs aboard, and with a long pole, pushes off from the shore. He does not try to overpower the river. He uses the pole only to steer, to keep his raft in the heart of the current, to avoid the shallows. He surrenders to the river's momentum, and its vast, tireless energy carries him swiftly and peacefully downstream. The ancient Stoic philosophers built their entire system of peace upon the wisdom of the second man. They taught that the first task of a person seeking tranquility is to make a clear distinction between what is within our power and what is not. The river is everything that is outside of your direct control. It is the past, with its unchangeable events. It is the future, with its infinite possibilities. It is the weather, the economy, the aging of your body. Crucially, it is the thoughts, feelings, and actions of other people. The anxious mind, like the first man, spends almost all of its energy trying to push this river. It endlessly replays past mistakes. It worries obsessively about future outcomes. It fumes and frets over what other people might be thinking. It is a recipe for perpetual exhaustion. The raft is the small, sacred circle of things that are truly within your power. And what are these? Only your own judgments, your own intentions, your own actions in this present moment, your virtue, your character, your response. This is the wood and vine from which you build your raft. The second man's wisdom was in knowing that the only sensible use of his energy was to build the best raft he could, and then to navigate with skill. He did not waste a single moment trying to command the current. Peace of mind, the Stoics taught, arrives when you redirect 100% of your attention away from the uncontrollable river and onto the quality and construction of your own raft. Think of this in the context of a demanding modern job. A manager is overseeing a critical project. Her peace is disturbed by a team member who is consistently unreliable. Her client is indecisive. The market is volatile. The manager, acting as the first traveler, is tormented. She lies awake at night, her mind spinning, trying to control the uncontrollable. She mentally rehearses angry conversations. She tries to predict the client's next whim. She agonizes over market reports. Her energy is hemorrhaging into the river, and her inner state is one of constant, grinding stress. She is pushing against the water, and she is drowning. Now, imagine she pauses and remembers the wisdom of the raft. You can do this in your own life. You can ask this question in the face of any stressful situation. What here is the river, and what is my raft? The unreliable colleague's behavior. That is the river. Your own clear, calm, documented communication with him. That is your raft, the client's final decision. The river, the quality and clarity of the presentation you prepare for them. The raft, the success or failure of the project in 1 year's time. The river, your own diligence, focus, and integrity today, in this very hour. That is your raft, and it is the only thing that deserves your precious, finite energy. This is not a practice of passive resignation. It is the practice of radical empowerment. It is the refusal to waste your life force on the unwinnable war against what is. By focusing only on your actions, your choices, your character, you stop being a victim of life's currents and become a skillful, peaceful navigator. You let the river do the work. Your only job is to build well and to steer with wisdom. To stand in the river and push against its current is more than just a waste of energy. The traveler who fights the water does not simply end his day exhausted. He ends it bruised, scraped, and filled with the bitter resentment of his own failure. In his struggle against reality, he multiplies his own pain. He takes the simple, objective fact of the river's strength and adds a second layer of self-inflicted agony through his resistance. This tendency of the human mind to compound its own misery is one of its most tragic and unconscious habits. It is a dynamic described with piercing clarity in the ancient Buddhist teachings as the parable of the second arrow. The Buddha once said, that all human beings throughout their lives will be struck by arrows. It is an unavoidable part of existence. When an ordinary, untrained person is struck by an arrow, the arrow of physical illness, of the loss of a loved one, of being spoken to harshly, they feel the pain of the wound. But then, they do not stop there. They immediately begin to grieve, to worry, and to lament. They cry out, "Why has this happened to me? How could this be? What have I done to deserve this?" They become obsessed with the pain, resisting it and fearing what it means. The Buddha said, this is like being struck by the first arrow, and then immediately taking a second arrow from one's own quiver and plunging it into the very same wound. Now, they feel the pain of two arrows. The first was shot by the world, the second was shot by themselves. Then, the Buddha described a wise and well-trained person. When this person is struck by the first arrow of life, the same illness, the same loss, the same harsh words, they too feel the initial, unavoidable pain of the wound. They do not deny it. They feel the sting. But that is where it ends. They do not add the second layer of mental commentary. They do not fall into despair. They do not tell themselves stories of catastrophe. They do not cry out against fate. They simply and mindfully acknowledge a painful feeling has arisen, and because they do not shoot the second arrow into themselves, they feel the pain of only one arrow, not two. This teaching reveals a crucial distinction between pain and suffering. The first arrow is pain. It is the direct, raw, unavoidable sensory experience of life's difficulties. It is the headache, the sting of rejection, the ache of grief. This pain is a clean pain. It is an inevitable part of the contract of being alive. The second arrow is suffering. Suffering is the story we tell ourselves about our pain. It is the intricate web of resistance, rumination, catastrophizing, and self-pity that we spin around the first arrow's wound. The first arrow is the event. The second arrow is our interpretation of the event. The first arrow is the river. The second arrow is our futile and painful attempt to push it. The most liberating truth one can ever realize is this: the second arrow is optional. It is always, without exception, self-inflicted. You can see this mechanism with devastating clarity in a common modern scenario. An employee receives an email from their boss containing a few lines of criticism about a recent report. The first arrow strikes. There is an immediate physical reaction, a flush of heat to the face, a clenching in the stomach, a jolt of adrenaline. This is the clean pain of the event. It is unpleasant, but if left alone, it is just a brief nervous system response that would fade in minutes. But the untrained mind rarely leaves it alone. It reaches immediately for its own quiver. The second arrow is launched. I can't believe I made such a stupid mistake. A third arrow follows. My boss must think I'm completely incompetent. I've lost all her respect. And a fourth. I bet everyone on the team knows about this. They're all laughing at me. And a fifth. My career is probably ruined. I'll never get ahead here in the space of a single minute. The simple, manageable pain of one critical email has been amplified into a full-blown narrative of professional and personal failure. The agony this person will feel for the rest of the day has almost nothing to do with the first arrow, the email, and everything to do with the volley of poison-tipped arrows they have relentlessly fired into their own heart. The practice, then, becomes one of radical self-restraint. It is the cultivation of a pause between the impact of the first arrow and the habitual reach for the second. When you feel that initial sting of hurt, of fear, of anger, the discipline is to stop. Do nothing, say nothing, think nothing. Simply bring all of your awareness to the raw, physical sensation of the wound itself. Where is it in your body? Is it a vibration in the chest, a hollow feeling in your gut, a tightness in your throat? Be the scientist of your own sensation. Observe its texture, its temperature, its pulse, without adding a single word of judgment or story. By doing this, you are holding the first arrow with a steady, compassionate hand. You are allowing the clean pain to be just what it is, without dipping it in the poison of your own narrative. You are letting the wound begin to heal without immediately tearing it open again. This is not about being numb or emotionless. It is about refusing to participate in your own suffering. It is about having the wisdom to let the world shoot only one arrow and keeping your own quiver firmly on your back. That second arrow, the one we shoot into our own wound, is not a simple, crude object. It is a work of profound and terrible creativity. The quiver from which we draw it is not filled with shafts of wood and stone, but with an infinite supply of stories. The primary mechanism for creating our own suffering, for turning the clean pain of the first arrow into the poisoned agony of the second, is the human mind's inexhaustible genius for narrative. There is a storyteller living in your skull. It never sleeps, and its favorite subject is you. There is an ancient parable from the East that illustrates this perfectly. A man was walking along a dusty road to his village at twilight. The light was fading, and shadows grew long and strange. As he rounded a bend, his eyes fell upon something coiled in the middle of the path, directly in his way. A snake. His blood ran cold. His heart hammered against his ribs. Adrenaline surged through him, and his entire body froze in a state of primal terror. He could see its patterned scales, its threatening, raised head, ready to strike. All the stories he had ever heard about deadly vipers flooded his mind. He was paralyzed, caught between the certainty of the danger ahead and the fear of turning his back on it. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his mind racing, his body locked in a panic. As he stood there, rooted to the spot, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, and a full moon began to rise, bathing the landscape in its gentle silver light. In this new, clearer illumination, the man's eyes adjusted. He looked again at the terrifying shape in the road, and he saw that it was not a snake at all. It was, and always had been, a coil of old frayed rope that some traveler had dropped. In an instant, the terror vanished. His heart rate slowed. The tension left his muscles, and he let out a long, shuddering breath, a laugh of pure relief catching in his throat. The fear he experienced was absolutely real. His body had fully reacted as if its life were in danger. But the cause of that fear was a complete fiction, a story his own mind had projected onto a neutral, harmless object. This is the work of the storyteller in the skull. The rope is the first arrow. It is the raw, uninterpreted data of reality. The critical email, the unanswered text, the strange look from a stranger, the physical sensation of pain. The rope simply is, The snake is the second arrow. It is the instantaneous, unconscious story the mind creates about the rope. The ego, that part of our mind that constructs our sense of self, cannot tolerate ambiguity or raw sensation. It demands meaning, and it demands it now. It asks one question over and over: what does this mean for me? And to answer that question, it writes a story. It becomes an author, a director, and a casting agent all at once, pulling from its vast library of past wounds, insecurities, and fears to produce a compelling and usually terrifying narrative. The suffering is never in the rope. The suffering is always in believing the story about the snake. Consider the modern ordeal of the unanswered message. A person sends a text that feels vulnerable, perhaps an apology, a declaration, or an important question. They see the small check marks indicating it has been delivered, and then that it has been read, and then silence. This is the rope. A message has been sent, and a reply has not yet been received. These are the only facts present in reality. But the storyteller in the skull cannot bear the open space of not knowing. It immediately begins to write. This is the snake. A drama of rejection unfolds. They are mad at me. I said the wrong thing. I've gone too far. Or a tragedy of neglect. I knew it. I'm not important to them. I always care more than other people do. Or even a horror story. Something terrible must have happened. The body does not know this is fiction. It believes the storyteller. The stomach churns. The chest tightens. The mind begins to obsessively check the phone. An immense amount of suffering is generated, not by the silence, but by the unverified story the mind is telling about the silence. The spiritual practice is to become a conscious observer of this inner author. It is to cultivate the ability to distinguish between the rope and the snake. When you feel that familiar surge of anxiety, that knot of anger, that wave of despair, the practice is to ask a simple, powerful question. What story am I telling myself right now? Just the asking of the question creates a gap. It creates a space between you, the calm, witnessing awareness, and the frantic, storytelling mind. First, you can name the rope. The fact is, my partner raised their voice. Then, you can name the snake. The story I am telling myself is that they don't love me anymore and our relationship is doomed. When you frame your interpretation as a story, you rob it of its absolute authority. You see that it is not the truth. It is a creative act, a mental fabrication. You see that the snake is made of thought stuff, and you can allow it to dissolve back into the harmless rope of reality, just as it did for the man on the moonlit path. The storyteller that lives in the mind is a master of many genres. It does not only write horror stories about snakes in the road, it also writes epic poems about courage, quiet verses about gratitude, and tender narratives of love. The mind constantly presents us with a choice of scripts, a menu of possible realities to inhabit. We are not forced to believe the story of the snake. The tragedy is that we so often choose to, investing our precious attention in the narratives of fear and lack. The path to wisdom lies in understanding that our focus is not a passive spotlight, but a powerful, life-giving force. Where we direct our attention, we create our world. There is a timeless story, passed down through generations, of an elder teaching a young child about the nature of life. They are sitting by a fire as the stars begin to appear. A great fight is going on inside me, the elder says to the child. It is a terrible and constant battle between two wolves. One wolf is darkness and despair. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, and the ceaseless chatter of the ego. The other wolf is light and hope. He is joy, peace, love, serenity, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, and compassion. The child looks into the flickering flames, pondering this for a moment, and then asks the elder, "Grandfather, which wolf wins the fight?" The old one looks at the child with gentle eyes and replies simply, "The one you feed." This parable, in its profound simplicity, contains the secret to transforming your inner world. Your attention is the food. A thought or a feeling, when it first arises, is like a stray animal that wanders into your camp. It is fleeting, almost weightless, a mere possibility. But if you turn your full attention to it, if you engage with it, analyze it, and replay it over and over in your mind, you are inviting it to stay. You are setting out a bowl of rich food for it. The thought, now nourished by your focus, grows stronger. It stops being a visitor and starts becoming a resident. It builds a den in the landscape of your mind. When a co-worker slights you, and you spend the entire day ruminating on the injustice, replaying their words, imagining clever retorts, and savoring the hot, bitter taste of your own righteousness, you are consciously feeding the wolf of resentment. You are nourishing it, helping it grow fat and strong, until its angry howl is the only sound you can hear. When you lie awake at night, obsessing over a mistake you made, drowning in the feeling of shame, you are feeding the wolf of guilt. But this same principle works for the other wolf. When you deliberately pause your frantic day to notice the warmth of the sun on your skin, or the taste of your coffee, or the simple fact that you are breathing, you are placing a morsel of food before the wolf of peace. When you make a conscious choice to call a friend and listen to them with your full presence, you are feeding the wolf of connection. The modern world has become an infinite 24-hour buffet for both wolves, but its business model is built almost entirely on feeding the first. The architecture of our digital lives, the algorithms of social media, the headlines of news outlets, is precision engineered to provoke, to outrage, and to frighten, because those emotions generate the most engagement. A person can begin their day by doom scrolling through a litany of global crises, then jump to a political argument on a forum, and finish by reading a stream of vitriolic comments. With every click, every view, every angry reply they type, they are shoveling high-calorie sustenance to the wolf of fear, division, and anxiety. Is it any wonder, after such a meal, that the world feels like a dark and hopeless place? The dark wolf has been fed a feast, and it is now the dominant force in their consciousness. The practice, then, is to become a mindful consumer of your own life. It is to recognize that you are the one who holds the bowl. You are the feeder of wolves. Before you engage with anything, a thought, a conversation, a piece of media, you can develop the habit of asking a simple, clarifying question. Which wolf will this feed? You hold your phone in your hand. You can use it to read about a scandal that will only fuel your cynicism, Or you can use it to listen to a piece of music that will soothe your soul. The choice is yours. You can engage in gossip that nourishes the wolf of superiority and judgment. Or you can offer a word of encouragement that nourishes the wolf of kindness. You are not a helpless victim of your inner states or your outer world. You are an active participant. Your every act of attention is a vote for the kind of world you want to inhabit, both internally and externally. This is not about pretending the dark wolf doesn't exist. It does. It represents our capacity for self-protection, our ability to sense danger. It should not be killed. It should simply be put on a diet. The goal is to consciously and deliberately withdraw your attention from the narratives of fear and resentment, and to actively, generously, and consistently feed the wolf of peace. As you do this, day by day, moment by moment, the wolf of light grows stronger, more confident. Its presence becomes the new baseline of your being. It's calm. Steady gaze becomes the lens through which you see the world, and its quiet, loving voice becomes the one you trust as your guide. As we learn to observe the two wolves fighting within, a deeper question may arise. What if the dark wolf, the one of anger and fear, is not entirely what it seems? What if its ferocity is not its true nature, but a defensive posture? What if its howls of rage are not threats, but cries of pain? Sometimes, the most disruptive forces in our minds are not villains to be starved, but shadows on the wall, cast by a much older, unhealed presence standing just out of sight. To find true peace, we must sometimes turn from the shadow and gently face the one who casts it. There is a Zen story about a small, remote monastery that became plagued by a ghost. Every night, as the monks sat in silent meditation, they would hear a mournful weeping coming from the rafters of the main hall. Sometimes there was a rattling, like chains being dragged across the old wooden floors. Fear began to spread through the community. The younger monks, terrified, would chant louder, hoping to drown out the sounds. The older ones would perform elaborate rituals of purification, trying to exorcise the disruptive spirit. But nothing worked. In fact, the more they resisted the ghost, the louder and more terrifying its manifestations became. Finally, they went to the ancient Zen master who lived in a simple hut up the mountain. After listening to their frightened stories, the master simply nodded. That evening, he came down to the monastery and took his seat alone on a cushion in the center of the haunted hall. He did not chant. He did not perform a ritual. He simply sat in the darkness and silence and waited. Soon, the sorrowful weeping began. The master did not flinch. He did not resist. He spoke into the darkness with a voice of profound gentleness. "I hear you," he said. "Your sorrow must be very great. I have brewed some tea. Please, come down and share it with me, and tell me your story." A shimmering, transparent form slowly descended from the rafters. It was the ghost of a long-forgotten patron of the temple, a man who had given all his money to build the hall, but whose name had been lost to time. All the ghost had ever wanted was to be remembered, to be acknowledged. It sat with the master, told its story, and in the simple, compassionate act of being seen and heard, its form dissolved into light. The weeping was never heard again. The temple, of course, is your own mind and body, and the ghost is an unhealed wound from your past. When a person experiences something overwhelming, an event of abandonment, shame, or terror, and they lack the resources or support to process it, a part of that experience can splinter off from the conscious mind. It becomes a ghost in the machine. It is a fragment of unprocessed life, frozen in time, that haunts the present. This ghost runs as a hidden program, a piece of invisible code in your operating system that dictates many of your most powerful and seemingly irrational reactions. All your attempts to fight it, to ignore it, to numb it with distractions, to argue with it through positive thinking, are like the monk's futile rituals. They only make the ghost stronger, because all a ghost ever wants is to be seen. You can recognize the ghost's signature by the trail of disproportionate emotion it leaves behind. A person is waiting for their partner, who is now 15 minutes late. A mild annoyance would be a proportionate response. But this person is not annoyed. They are consumed by a 10 out of 10 panic. Their heart is racing. They imagine horrible accidents. They are gripped by a terror that makes no logical sense. Or, conversely, they are filled with a white-hot rage, composing furious texts in their head, feeling a sense of betrayal that is wildly out of scale with the minor transgression. This emotional glitch, this reaction that is so much larger than the event that triggered it, is the ghost at work. The panic is not about the partner being 15 minutes late. It is the ghost of a 5-year-old child left waiting at the school gates, terrified of being forgotten forever. The rage is the ghost of a past betrayal, a deeper wound that has been touched and reactivated by this small, present moment event. The practice here is not to exercise, but to do as the Master did, to offer tea. When you notice one of these disproportionate emotional glitches in yourself, the first step is to recognize it as the ghost's cry. Instead of believing the 10-10 emotion and acting on it by lashing out or collapsing into panic, you can pause, place a hand on your heart, and turn your attention inward. You can speak to that terrified or enraged part of you as if it were a separate, frightened child. I see you. I feel how scared you are right now. This feeling is so big. What old memory does this remind you of? You are not trying to fix or banish the feeling. You are offering it the calm, steady, compassionate presence of your adult self. You are giving the ghost the witness it never had when the original wound occurred. This is the work of true healing. It is the courageous act of turning toward the haunted places within. It is the understanding that our most difficult anxieties are often echoes, fragments of an old story that is simply asking, finally, to be heard. By meeting these ghosts with kindness, we do not become possessed by them. We integrate them. We bring them out of the shadows and into the compassionate light of our own awareness, and the machine of our mind, once haunted by glitches and errors, can begin to run with a new and profound sense of peace. We have explored the haunted temple within, learning to meet our own ghosts with compassion. Now, we turn our gaze outward to the world of other people. For if our own inner home is filled with these unseen forces, we must assume that the home of every other person we meet is also populated by its own ghosts, its own stories, its own unhealed wounds. The person who bumps into you on the street, the colleague who sends a sharp email, the driver who cuts you off in traffic, they are not acting in a vacuum. Their boat is being steered by currents you cannot see. And understanding this is the key to navigating the crowded river of life with peace. A wise man, it is said, was crossing a river in his small boat on a misty morning. The world was quiet, the water was still, and he was in a state of deep contentment. Suddenly, out of the thick fog, another boat appeared and slammed into the side of his. The man's peace was shattered. A surge of hot anger rose in his chest. Who was this careless fool who had rammed him? He opened his mouth to shout, to unleash a torrent of blame and abuse on the clumsy oarsman. But as he turned to yell, he saw that the other boat was empty. It had simply come loose from its moorings upstream and was drifting aimlessly with the current. In that instant, his anger vanished completely. It was impossible to be angry at an empty boat. He simply took his oar, pushed the other boat away, and continued his journey, his tranquility restored. Later that day, in the village, a man accidentally bumped into him, making him drop a parcel of food. The wise man felt the familiar flash of irritation begin to rise, but then he looked at the other man's face, a face etched with worry and distraction, and he smiled, bowed, and said to himself, "Another empty boat." This parable of the empty boat is one of the most powerful practices for dissolving anger and anxiety in our interactions with others. The human ego, the storyteller of the self, is a machine that personalizes everything. When an event occurs, especially a negative one involving another person, the ego's immediate unconscious assumption is that the event is about me. That person is intentionally disrespecting me. Their carelessness is a judgment on my importance. The anger, the resentment, the hurt, it all requires a target. It needs to believe in a conscious, malicious actor in the other boat. The moment the wise man saw the boat was empty, his anger had no fuel. It could not exist without a story of blame and intent. The core teaching is a radical practice in depersonalization. It is the discipline of choosing to see every boat that bumps into you as an empty boat. The person who is rude to you in line at the store is not being rude at you. They are adrift in the fog of their own stressful day. Their boat is empty of any real intention towards you. The loved one who says something sharp and hurtful is likely being steered by one of their own ghosts. Their pain is spilling over and bumping into you in their own way. Their boat is empty, too, empty of the calm, conscious presence you wish they had in that moment. To see the world this way is to systematically dismantle the trigger for so much of our daily suffering. Think of the universal modern misery of driving in traffic. A person is moving along, perhaps listening to music, feeling relatively calm. Suddenly, another car aggressively swerves into their lane, forcing them to brake hard. The full boat reaction is immediate and visceral. The ego screams, "That jerk, he did that on purpose. He thinks his time is more important than mine." The driver might lay on the horn, flash their lights, or descend into a state of simmering rage that poisons the next hour of their day. They have made the entire event about them. Now, imagine applying the empty boat practice in that same moment. The car swerves. The first arrow of adrenaline hits. But then, instead of launching the second arrow of rage, the driver consciously thinks, "That is an empty boat." This thought is a circuit breaker. It means the person driving that car is not in a conspiracy against me. they are lost in their own world. Maybe they are a new parent who hasn't slept in 3 days. Maybe they just received terrible news on the phone. Maybe they are simply a prisoner of their own impatience and unhappiness. This reframing does not make the driving safe or acceptable, but it makes it impersonal. And because it is impersonal, the anger has nowhere to land. It dissolves in the air like a puff of smoke. You are a traveler on this river of life, and it is filled with other boats. They will bump you. They will scrape against your hull. This is a certainty. The practice is to train your mind again and again to see these boats as empty. This does not mean you become a passive victim. You still have to steer. You may need to create distance from a boat that is constantly bumping you. You may need to call out to a boat that is heading for the rocks. You set boundaries. You protect your space. But you do it from a place of wise, calm clarity, not from the hot, confused fog of reactive anger. You respond to the reality of the situation, rather than reacting to the fiction of a personal attack. By emptying the other boats of the malicious intent you project onto them, you drain your own heart of the venom of resentment and find you can navigate even the most crowded waters with an unshakable and spacious peace. We have learned to see the boats of others as empty, steered by the invisible currents of their own stories. This practice brings great peace to our interactions. Now, we must turn this compassionate inquiry toward ourselves and look at the boat we present to the world. We must examine the face we show to others, the carefully constructed performance of a self we want them to see. For just as we project stories onto others, we project a story of ourselves. And this story can become a beautiful mask that slowly, imperceptibly, fuses with our skin. There is a tale of a great actor in an ancient city, a man famous for his portrayals of noble kings and valiant heroes. On stage, his presence was magnetic, clad in magnificent robes, a golden crown upon his head. His voice would boom with authority and wisdom, and the crowds would be mesmerized. He was so celebrated for these roles that he began to carry the persona with him into his daily life. He would wear his silken robes to the market. He would speak to merchants with a regal air. At first, it was a source of amusement and pride. But as the years went on, the game became a prison. The line between the actor and the king began to dissolve. He grew terrified of being seen in simple clothes, of speaking in his natural voice. The mask had become his face, and he now lived in constant, gnawing fear that someone would discover the truth, that underneath the crown and the costume, he was just an ordinary aging man. The weight of the identity he fought so hard to maintain was crushing him. This actor's plight is the human condition in miniature. We all wear masks. The great psychologist Carl Jung called this the persona, from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in classical theatre. The persona is the social face we present to the world, and it is a necessary, even healthy, tool for navigating a complex society. You wear one mask for a professional meeting, another for a romantic dinner, and yet another when comforting a child. The danger is not in the wearing of masks, but in the forgetting that you are wearing one. When the actor forgets he is an actor, he becomes a slave to his role. When we mistake our persona for our authentic self, we become slaves to the anxiety of being discovered. This gives rise to the pervasive modern affliction of imposter syndrome. It is that deep, secret feeling that you are a fraud, that your accomplishments are unearned, that you have somehow fooled everyone around you, and that at any moment, the curtain will be pulled back and you will be exposed as incompetent, unworthy, and unlovable. This fear is not a sign of your inadequacy. It is the natural consequence of over-identifying with your mask. Your authentic self, the one behind the mask, knows that the performance is not the whole truth. The anxiety you feel is the tension between the polished, perfect role you are playing and the complex, messy, beautifully human reality of who you actually are. Life becomes an exhausting performance, and all your energy is spent on maintaining the costume and dreading the moment it might slip. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the curated theatres of social and professional media. A person constructs their online profile with the precision of a master costume designer. They select the most flattering photographs, post only the triumphant moments, list their achievements without a hint of the struggle or luck that was involved. They create a flawless digital avatar, a mask of the successful, happy, and well-adjusted individual. This becomes their public face, their brand. But this perfection is a heavy crown to wear. It creates a chasm between their public persona and their private reality. They feel a wave of anxiety before a job interview, terrified they cannot possibly live up to the spectacular employee described on their resume. They feel a deep dread before a first date, convinced they will be a disappointment compared to the witty, adventurous person in their profile. They are living like the actor king, trapped in a performance of their own making, haunted by the fear of being seen as they truly are. The practice, then, is not to tear off all your masks in a violent fit of authenticity. That would be chaotic and unskillful. The practice is to simply, quietly, and consistently become aware of the mask you are wearing. Right now, in this moment, can you feel its subtle weight? Can you feel the slight tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your brow, from the effort of holding it perfectly in place? The practice is to consciously create moments of solitude and safety where you can ceremonially take the mask off, to sit in the quiet of your own room and connect with the face underneath, the face that is tired, the face that is uncertain, the face that is sometimes sad and is always, already worthy of love without any performance whatsoever. The goal is to befriend the person behind the mask. When you no longer fear or judge your own authentic self, the fear of being exposed by others loses its terrifying power. Your self-worth is no longer tethered to the applause of the crowd. You can then wear your various masks lightly, like the skillful tools they are meant to be, and not like the heavy armor of an identity you must defend to the death. You can play your many roles in the world with grace and joy, because you never forget where home is. It is in the quiet truth of your own being. Long after the show is over and the theatre is dark, all of these ideas we have explored, the visitor, the empty boat, the mask, the ghost, they are powerful tools for understanding the landscape of the mind. They are like maps, carefully drawn by those who have walked the path before. They can provide clarity, direction, and a sense of the terrain. But it is of the utmost importance to remember a vital truth, a warning that is central to all deep spiritual traditions. The map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. A Zen master was walking with his student on a cloudless night, the sky filled with 1,000,000 stars and dominated by a brilliant, perfect full moon. The master stopped, and to illustrate a point, he raised his arm and pointed with his index finger toward the luminous orb in the sky. "Look," he said to the student, "the moon is magnificent tonight. See its light, its perfect stillness." The student, who was very diligent and eager to please, squinted with intense concentration. He stared and stared, a look of profound focus on his face. After a long moment of silence, the master asked, "Well, what do you see?" The student, proud of his focus, replied, "Master, I see your finger. I see the lines on your knuckle, the shape of your nail, the way the moonlight catches the small hairs on your hand. I am studying it very closely." The master let out a long, soft sigh and lowered his arm. "My finger," he said, "is here only to show you the moon. Please, I beg you, do not confuse the finger for the moon. This is perhaps the most crucial teaching of all. Every word you are hearing now, every story, every concept, every psychological model, it is all just a finger pointing at the moon. The moon is the direct, non-verbal, lived experience of peace. It is the silent, spacious awareness that is reading these words inside your mind. It is the simple sensation of your own breath, moving in and out of your body. It is the feeling of stillness that exists right here, in this moment, underneath all the noise. The human mind, and especially the ego, has a dangerous tendency. It falls in love with the finger. It becomes a connoisseur of fingers. The ego loves to collect concepts. It can learn all the terminology of Buddhism, Stoicism, and psychology. It can build an impressive intellectual fortress out of these ideas, able to debate the nuances of the shadow self or the dichotomy of control. It can accumulate spiritual knowledge like a dragon hoarding gold, feeling very wise, very special, and very advanced. But all the while, its back is turned to the moon. It has mistaken the accumulation of knowledge for the attainment of wisdom. It has polished the signpost instead of walking the path. This is the great trap of the spiritual journey, becoming a collector of maps, while never daring to set foot in the actual territory. This pattern is rampant in our age of information. A person suffering from deep anxiety can easily become a self-help junkie. They listen to hundreds of hours of podcasts on healing. They read every best-selling book on trauma and mindfulness. Their phone is filled with saved quotes and screenshots of spiritual aphorisms. Their mind becomes a vast and intricate library of psychological and spiritual data. They can explain to you in precise detail the mechanism of the second arrow, the function of the persona, and the theory of the empty boat. And yet, their heart still races in the middle of the night. The wave of panic still overwhelms them in a crowded room. They are like a person who has memorized every recipe in 1,000 cookbooks, but who has never once entered a kitchen to simply boil an egg. They are starving to death while admiring their collection of menus, so the practice now shifts. It becomes an invitation to gently, and with great kindness, lower the finger. The purpose of this journey, of these words, is not to give you more fascinating ideas to think about. It is to encourage you to discover the profound peace that is already here when you temporarily stop thinking at all. These concepts are useful only insofar as they direct your attention back to your own direct, immediate experience. Can you, right now, use these words as a pointer? Can you look where they are pointing? They are pointing to the simple sensation of your body sitting or lying down. Feel its weight, its temperature. That is the moon. They are pointing to the sounds in your room. Listen to them without labeling them. Just hear the raw data of sound. That is the moon. They are pointing to the silence that is holding both the sound of my voice and the sounds of your room. Can you sense that vast, silent container? That, too, is the moon. The teachings are a raft, built to get you across a turbulent river of confusion. Once you reach the other shore, the shore of direct, silent, present moment awareness, you must be willing to leave the raft behind. To carry it on your back would be an absurd and heavy burden. The finger has shown you the way. Now, let it go and gaze at the moon. To turn away from the finger and gaze at the moon is to turn toward the totality of your own experience. The moon, in its fullness, has a dark side and a light side, and they are inseparable. True spiritual inquiry does not mean staring only at the pleasant, well-lit parts of our minds. It means we must also have the courage to explore the dark, fertile soil from which everything grows. We must be willing to enter the wild, forgotten garden of the unconscious. In a mountain monastery, there was a vast and beautiful garden, famous for its raked sand, its sculpted pines, and its vibrant flowers. But behind the main hall, there was a forgotten corner, a patch of land that had been neglected for generations. It was a tangled mess of thorny vines, overrun with weeds, and rumored to be home to snakes and frightening creatures. The monks avoided it, seeing it as a place of chaos and ugliness. One day, the head gardener, a very old monk, gave a young, ambitious novice a single task: to reclaim that patch of land. The young monk was dismayed. He wanted to burn it all to the ground and start over. But the old gardener stopped him. "Patience," he whispered. "Do not be so quick to judge what is a weed and what is a flower that has been starved of light. Get your hands in the soil. Work slowly. Listen to the land. See what is truly here." The young monk, following this advice, began the slow, arduous work. He carefully untangled the thorny vines, and underneath, he found a species of night-blooming jasmine, its fragrance intoxicating. As he cleared the choking weeds, he discovered rare medicinal herbs that the monastery had been importing at great cost. He learned that the snakes he had feared were not venomous, but were keeping the garden free from pests. He discovered that the deepest, richest soil was in this dark, damp corner. By tending to what everyone else had rejected as ugly and frightening, the young monk created the most vibrant, resilient, and complete part of the entire garden, a place of profound beauty that held both shadow and light in perfect harmony. This neglected plot of land is the human shadow. As we grow up, we are taught, both explicitly and implicitly, that certain parts of our personality are unacceptable. Our anger may be punished, our sadness dismissed, our boisterous joy shushed. A creative impulse might be ridiculed as impractical. A quiet, sensitive nature might be shamed as weak. In order to survive and belong, we take these unacceptable traits and we push them down into the darkness of the unconscious. This is the shadow. But the shadow does not only contain what we think of as negative traits like jealousy or greed. It also contains our repressed gold, our disowned strength, our creativity, our wildness, our power. These parts do not die in the darkness. They grow wild, untended, and potent to live a whole life. We cannot wall off this part of our garden. The energy it takes to keep the shadow repressed is the source of a deep and persistent anxiety. The disowned parts leak out sideways as self-sabotage, as addictions, as inexplicable moods, or, most commonly, they are projected onto others. We see the things we have disowned in ourselves, and we hate them and attack them in the people around us. This is the source of our most intense and irrational judgments of others. A person who is obsessively responsible and diligent might find themselves consumed with a visceral hatred for a colleague they see as lazy or irresponsible. The sheer emotional charge of their judgment is the clue. It is not a simple disagreement on work ethic. It is a shadow projection. The diligent person has, at some point in their life, been forced to disown and repress their own need for rest, for play, for unstructured being. They have a lazy part locked away in their own shadow garden. When they see this trait embodied by their colleague, they attack it with such ferocity because they cannot bear to face its existence within themselves. The colleague becomes a convenient screen onto which they can project their own inner civil war. The practice, then, is to use your own sharpest judgments as a map back to your own forgotten garden. When you feel a powerful, disproportionate wave of anger, disgust, or judgment towards someone, pause. Instead of focusing all your energy outward on their flaws, turn the spotlight of awareness inward. Ask yourself with genuine curiosity, what are they showing me that lives inside of me? Is there a small part of me that longs to be more like them? A part that I have shamed into silence? When you judge someone's arrogance, is there a part of you that wishes it had more confidence? When you judge someone's neediness, is there a part of you that is starving for connection? To ask these questions is to do as the young monk did, to get your hands in the soil. It is the beginning of tending your own garden. As you learn to acknowledge and even welcome these disowned parts, the emotional charge you feel toward others will dissipate. You may still not approve of their behavior, but it will no longer hook you, because you are no longer using them as a battleground for your own inner conflict. This is the path to wholeness. It is the courageous work of unlocking the gate, walking into the overgrown places, and discovering the rare flowers that bloom only in the dark. For in your shadow, you will find not only what you fear, but your most vital, authentic, and powerful life. As we bravely tend to the forgotten garden of our inner world, a natural consequence begins to unfold. Our perception of the outer world shifts. The weeds of our own projections are cleared, and we start to see things as they are, not as our fears and desires have painted them. We begin to question the importance we have placed on the events, people, and objects around us. We start to notice their true weight, and we are often surprised by how light they turn out to be. 2 monks were on a long pilgrimage through the mountains. One was old and had walked this path many times. The other was young and full of worldly ambition. One afternoon, they stopped to rest by a clear, fast-flowing river. As the sunlight hit the water, it glinted off something on the riverbed. The young monk reached in and pulled out a stunningly beautiful stone, a jewel that shimmered with an inner fire. He was overcome with delight. "Fortune has blessed us," he exclaimed. "This is worth a great deal. Our monastery will be rich." The old monk simply smiled and said nothing. They continued their journey, but the young monk had changed. His steps, once light, were now heavy. He was no longer noticing the beauty of the mountains or the feel of the wind. His mind was entirely consumed by the jewel in his robes. He walked with one hand constantly clutching it. He grew suspicious of every other pilgrim they passed on the road, imagining they wanted to steal his treasure. At night, he barely slept, worried the jewel would be taken. The small, beautiful stone had become a terrible burden, its emotional weight growing heavier with every step. Finally, after several days of this torment, he could bear it no longer. He stopped, took the jewel from his robes, and with a great cry, threw it as far as he could into a deep ravine. He watched it disappear. An immense wave of relief washed over him. His shoulders relaxed, his breath deepened, and he felt a lightness he hadn't realized he had lost. The old monk, who had been watching, walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now," he said softly, "you are truly rich." This is the profound wisdom of the ancient Stoics. They taught that things themselves do not disturb us. Our judgments about things are what cause our suffering. The jewel was just a stone. It had no inherent power to create anxiety. The young monk's suffering came entirely from his own mind, from the judgment, "This is good," the desire, "I must possess this," and the fear, "I must not lose this." These three thoughts gave the neutral object its crushing weight. The Stoics taught that all external things, wealth, health, reputation, relationships, success, and failure, are fundamentally indifferent. They are outside of our direct control. They are the weather. They are the river. Our emotional turmoil is generated not by these things, but by the fierce grip of our desires and aversions. We decide that one outcome is essential for our happiness, and that another would be an unbearable tragedy. We attach our entire sense of well-being to these external, uncontrollable events. This attachment is the weight, and it is the primary cause of human anxiety. Freedom, the Stoics argued, is not found in successfully accumulating all the jewels, but in learning to want them with an open hand, not a clenched fist. Consider the modern pilgrimage to acquire a dream home. A person or a family fixates on this one goal as the ultimate key to their happiness and security. The house becomes the jewel. They invest it with an immense emotional weight. It is no longer just a structure of wood and plaster. It is the symbol of their success, the container of their future joy, the proof of their worth. The process of searching and bidding, therefore, becomes an agonizing emotional ordeal. Every lost bid is not just a setback, it is a personal failure. Every delay is a source of intense frustration. Their peace of mind is held hostage by interest rates and market fluctuations. They are being crushed by the weight of a house they do not even own yet. The practice is to consciously re-evaluate the true weight of the things you are chasing or fleeing from. You can do this with any object of your anxiety. Is it a promotion at work, a person's romantic interest, a specific number in your bank account? Take a moment and mentally place that thing in the palm of your hand. Feel the weight you have assigned to it. Now, see it for what it is, an external circumstance. It has no power to touch your essential being. The practice is to change your inner posture from one of desperate need to one of calm preference. It would be nice to have this, but my peace is not inside it. I will work towards it, but my self-worth does not depend on it. This mental shift is the equivalent of throwing the jewel back into the river. It is not an act of resignation, but an act of profound liberation. When you stop making your inner tranquility conditional on outer circumstances, you become light. You can move through the world with a new grace and ease because you are no longer weighed down by the heavy burden of your own attachments. You realize the young monk's great truth, that true wealth is not found in the things you carry, but in the lightness you feel when you are carrying nothing at all. When we finally put down the heavy jewels of our worldly attachments, a great quiet descends. We stop our frantic searching for happiness in things outside of ourselves. In this newfound inner silence, we may begin to hear a sound that was always there, but was drowned out by the noise of our striving. It is not the fearsome pounding of an intruder, but something much more vulnerable, the soft, persistent knock of a small child at the door of our heart. In a great temple known for its profound silence, the monks would sit for hours in deep meditation. One day, a small child, having wandered away from his mother in the market, found his way into the temple. Lost and frightened, he began to cry. His small sobs echoed in the vast, silent hall. Several of the meditating monks grew irritated. One turned and shot the child a stern glare, willing him to be silent. Another tried to ignore the sound, clenching his jaw and focusing harder on his own breath. A third whispered a harsh shh in the child's direction. Feeling this wave of cold, unwelcoming energy, the child's fear intensified, and his sobs grew into loud, panicked wails. The old abbot, sitting on a raised platform, opened his eyes. He did not scold. He did not ignore. He slowly rose from his cushion, walked over to the hysterical child, and knelt down so their eyes were on the same level. He softened his own face into an expression of pure kindness. "Oh, little one," he said, his voice a gentle murmur. "It sounds like you are very, very scared. Tell me what's wrong." The child, seeing for the first time a face that was not a wall of resistance but an ocean of acceptance, instantly felt safe. The storm of his crying subsided into a few last shuddering sobs. He crawled into the abbot's lap, and within moments, he was fast asleep. For many of us, our anxiety is this lost and crying child, and for most of our lives, we have acted like the irritated monks. When the feeling of anxiety arises, that familiar tightness in the chest, the racing thoughts, the sense of dread, our first impulse is to resist it. We try to glare at it with self-loathing. "Why am I like this? I'm so weak." We try to shush it with harsh commands. "Just get over it. Stop being so anxious." Or we try to ignore it, distracting ourselves with work, with food, with endless entertainment. And just like with the child in the temple, these strategies of resistance only amplify the distress. The anxiety only gets louder. The great psychological and spiritual turning point is when we realize that our anxiety is not an adult pathology to be fixed. but very often, the unprocessed pain of a much younger version of ourselves. That sudden wave of panic you feel before a presentation is not the fear of a competent adult. It is the terror of a 7-year-old who was once shamed by a teacher in front of the class. That desperate need for reassurance after a minor disagreement is not the insecurity of your present self. It is the cry of a small child who once felt abandoned or misunderstood. This inner child is the true face of the ghost in the machine. It is knocking at the door of your adult consciousness, asking for the safety and compassion it never received when the original wound occurred. The path to healing is to stop being the annoyed monk and to start becoming the wise abbot. This is the practice of reparenting yourself. When you feel that familiar wave of panic or that deep ache of insecurity, the first step is to soften, not to harden. Instead of meeting the feeling with a wall of resistance, meet it with a gentle, curious welcome. You can place a hand on your heart and say inwardly, "Hello there, I feel you. I know you're here." You can acknowledge the feeling's true age. This feels very young. This feels like the fear of a small child. In your mind's eye, you can even picture that younger version of you. How old are they? Where are they? What is happening around them? Then, you offer that child what the abbot offered, your calm, loving, adult presence. You speak to it silently from the wisest and kindest part of you. You don't offer it logic or arguments. A terrified child doesn't need a lecture. It needs to hear one thing: you are safe. I am here with you now. I will not leave you. I love you. In that moment, you become the parent you always needed. You are the calm in the storm. You are the safe harbor. You are bringing the light of your adult consciousness to the dark, frightened corners of your own history. This is not a one-time fix, but a radical new relationship with yourself. It is the end of the inner war. For years, you have treated your anxiety as an enemy to be conquered. The invitation now is to treat it as a sacred messenger, a lost child who is finally asking to be brought home. In doing so, you don't just find relief from your anxiety. You begin to heal its very root. You become your own sanctuary. To meet the crying child within us with the compassion of a wise abbot requires a skill that our frantic, modern lives have all but erased. It is the ability to stop, to truly stop. In the heat of an emotional reaction, when the old programming of our anxiety takes over, our responses are instantaneous, automatic, and destructive. To change this pattern, we do not need to think faster or try harder. We need to learn the lost art of the sacred pause. There is a story of a young swordsman, famous for his lightning-fast reflexes and aggressive attacks. He was strong and brave, but in every duel with his old quiet master, he was effortlessly defeated. The young man would rush in, a flurry of steel and fury, but the master would simply sidestep, parry, and disarm him without even seeming to break a sweat. Frustrated and humbled, the student finally asked, "Master, how do you defeat me so easily? My attack is faster and stronger." The master replied, "Your problem is not your speed. Your problem is that there is no space in your speed. You react, but you do not see. Your haste makes you blind." For the next month, the master gave the student a new kind of training. He was forbidden from sparring. His only task was to stand on a mountaintop, sword at the ready, from sunrise to sunset. His instruction was to simply watch the wind move through the grass, to watch the clouds drift across the sky, and to learn to take one single conscious breath before making any movement at all. At first, the impatient young man was tormented by the stillness. But gradually, something shifted. In the quiet space of that single breath, his awareness sharpened. He began to notice the subtle dance of leaves, the flight path of a distant hawk. The world came alive in that pause. When the master finally called him to duel again, the young man was transformed. He was calm, grounded, present. He faced his master, and as the attack came, he did not immediately react. He took his single sacred breath. And in that moment of profound stillness, he saw the opening. His movement was precise, effortless, and true. His power had not been in the motion, but in the space he had learned to create before the motion. As the great psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. For the mind conditioned by anxiety and trauma, that space has collapsed. A stimulus occurs, a critical comment, a sudden noise, a feared thought, and the response is an immediate neurological reflex. There is no space, and therefore no choice. We are simply puppets dancing on the strings of our past conditioning. The entire practice of mindfulness, the entire path to peace, is the art of intentionally inserting a wedge into that chain reaction. It is the practice of creating and expanding that space. The sacred pause is the tool we use to do it. Imagine a heated argument with a loved one. They say something that triggers you. It feels unfair, critical, or dismissive. This is the stimulus. Instantly, your nervous system lights up. Your body prepares for battle. The automatic, conditioned response is to immediately fire back with a defensive or hurtful comment of your own. And so the cycle of conflict escalates, and the possibility for connection is lost. But imagine, in that split second between hearing their words and formulating your own, you remember the practice. You consciously bring your awareness to your feet on the floor, and you take one deliberate breath, in and out. It may only last 2 seconds, but in that tiny pocket of time, a revolution occurs. The automatic circuit of action-reaction is broken. The immediate, overwhelming impulse to retaliate loses its momentum. You have created a space. In that space, you now have a choice. You can still choose to say the angry thing, but it is now a choice, not a reflex. Or you can choose to say, "I need a moment. What you said really landed hard." Or you can ask, "Can you help me understand what you mean by that?" The pause did not change what they said. It gave you the freedom to change the entire trajectory of the interaction. It gave you back your power. This is the practice you can bring into every corner of your life. Your freedom is not in some distant future or exotic retreat. It exists in the space of a single, conscious breath. You can practice when the phone rings. Let it ring one more time as you breathe. You can practice before opening your laptop in the morning. You can practice before you step out of your car and into your home. You can use any transition as a reminder. Most powerfully, you can learn to use the arising of a strong emotion itself as the bell of mindfulness, the signal to pause. When you feel the heat of anger or the cold grip of fear, Let that be your cue. Stop, breathe, create space. In that sacred pause, you can meet the crying inner child with the compassion of the abbot. You can see the empty boat instead of the malicious enemy. You can feel the weight of the jewel and choose to let it go. All of your wisdom, all of your healing, all of your freedom is born in that space. What is this sacred pause? What is the nature of the space we discover when we stop, when we breathe, when we resist the pull of our habitual reactions? It is not a void. It is not a dead absence of activity. The space that opens up in the pause is a doorway into the most profound reality of our being. It is like the silence between the notes of a symphony. It is the silence that gives the music its shape, its emotion, and its meaning. Without the silence, there would only be a meaningless wall of noise. The peace we seek is not found in creating better sounding notes, but in learning to appreciate the silence from which they are born. A university professor, a man renowned for his intellect and his vast knowledge of philosophy, once came to visit a Zen master to inquire about the nature of Zen. The scholar arrived and immediately began to speak, showcasing his own learning. He talked about all the books he had read, the complex theories he understood, and the questions he had about subtle points of doctrine. He spoke without pause, filling the small tea room with his ideas. The Zen master listened patiently and then began to prepare tea. He placed a cup before the professor and began to pour. He filled the cup to the brim, but he did not stop. The hot tea overflowed, spilling onto the saucer and then onto the table. "Stop!" shouted the scholar, leaping to his feet. "The cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring, looked at the professor, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? This is the great invitation of the spiritual path, to empty the cup of the mind." The Western mind, in particular, hears the word emptiness and thinks of a sterile void, a bleak nothingness. But in the Eastern wisdom traditions, emptiness, or sunyata, is the most positive and generative concept of all. Emptiness is not nothingness. It is pure potentiality. A cup is useful because it is empty. A room is useful because of its empty space. A drum makes a sound because it is empty on the inside. Your mind becomes a vessel for wisdom and peace only when it is emptied of the constant, noisy clutter of its own thinking. Our true nature is not the content that fills our consciousness. The endless stream of thoughts, feelings, memories, and plans. Our true nature is the consciousness itself. It is the vast, silent, aware space in which all that content appears and disappears. You are not the movie playing on the screen. You are the screen itself, which remains unstained and unchanged by even the most violent or tragic film. You are not the notes of the music, with their fleeting joys and sorrows. You are the deep, eternal silence that allows the music to be heard. To realize this is to empty the cup. It is to shift your identity away from the fleeting things in your mind and to rest in the boundless, peaceful space that holds all things. This teaching has never been more relevant than in our modern age of relentless stimulation. Most people live in mortal fear of an empty cup. They live in a state of perpetual filling. From the moment they wake up and reach for their phone, to the moment they fall asleep with the screen still glowing before their eyes. they are pouring content into their consciousness. They work on a computer while a podcast plays in their ears. They eat their meals while scrolling through feeds. They exercise while listening to high-tempo music. They relax by consuming hours of dramatic television. There is no space. There is no silence. There is no pause. This creates a deep, subtle, and pervasive anxiety. The fear of boredom, which is really the fear of being alone with the raw, unbuffered reality of one's own being. If the noise stops, what might we hear? If the screen goes dark, what might we see in the reflection? This terror of the empty cup keeps us addicted to distraction, endlessly filling ourselves so we don't have to feel our own emptiness. But the peace we crave is only found in that emptiness. The practice, then, is to intentionally, radically, create moments of non-stimulation. It is a detoxification from the noise. It is the brave act of not filling the cup. Can you drive to work for 10 minutes with the radio off? Can you drink your morning coffee and do nothing but drink your morning coffee? Can you take a walk in nature without headphones, listening only to the wind and the birds? Can you sit on a chair in your living room for 5 minutes without reading, without your phone, without any task at all, and simply be? At first, this practice of emptiness may feel uncomfortable. The mind, like a spoiled child denied its toy, may scream in protest. It will offer you 1,000 urgent things to think about. This is normal. Let the thoughts come. Let them go. Your task is not to fight the thoughts. Your task is to keep your attention on the silence that is behind them. Can you feel it now, even as you listen to my voice? There is a silence in this room that is holding the sound of these words. That silence was here before the words began. It will be here after they end. It is not a fragile silence that is broken by sound. It is a vast, powerful silence that contains all sound. This silence is your true home. It is the nature of your own mind. By learning to rest in it, to trust it, to befriend it, you discover a peace that does not depend on the world being quiet or your thoughts being positive. You empty your cup and you find that you are already and have always been completely full. That silent, empty space we discover in the pause is not fragile, weak, or passive. It is the most powerful, stable, and resilient force in the universe. It does not need to be protected. It is itself the ultimate sanctuary. This silent awareness, which is your true nature, does not have the quality of delicate glass. It has the quality of a great mountain, rooted in the earth, its peak touching the sky, unshakable in its majestic presence. There was a monastery built on the slopes of a great mountain in a land where the earth often trembled. The monks who lived there were used to small tremors, but one afternoon, a violent earthquake struck. The ground lurched and bucked. Bookcases toppled, roof tiles shattered and fell, and a great crack appeared in the courtyard wall. The younger monks, gripped by terror, screamed and ran from the buildings, stumbling and falling as they tried to find open ground. It was pure chaos. When the shaking finally subsided, they gathered together, shaken and bruised, and realized their master was not among them. Fearing the worst, they rushed back into the main meditation hall. There, amidst the dust and debris, the old master sat on his cushion, perfectly still, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and even. as if he had been enjoying a gentle spring breeze. A young monk, trembling, approached him. "Master," he cried, "how can you be so calm? Did you not feel the great shaking? Were you not terrified for your life?" The master slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the frightened faces of his students, and then around at the disordered hall. "Ah, yes," he said calmly. "The earth shakes. I sit. Where is the problem? This is the practice of becoming the mountain. Your being is the mountain. On its surface, the weather changes from moment to moment. Violent thunderstorms of anger crash against its slopes. Heavy fogs of confusion and doubt descend upon its peaks. Avalanches of sudden grief tear down its face. Icy blizzards of fear can cover it for days or weeks at a time. This is the nature of life. This is the nature of the mind. The untrained person identifies completely with this surface weather. When the storm of anger rages, they become the storm. When the fog of sadness rolls in, they become the sadness. They are tossed about, helpless, by every change in the mental climate. The practice of equanimity is to realize that you are not the weather. You are the mountain itself. You are the vast, solid, unmoving presence that holds all the weather. The deepest core of the mountain, its bedrock of ancient granite, is not disturbed by the hurricane on its surface. It does not care if it is sunny or snowy. It simply is. Its nature is a deep, profound, unshakable stillness. By learning to rest your awareness in this deep, core stability, you can experience the most violent emotional weather without being destroyed by it. You can feel the sharp winds of anxiety, but you know that you are the mountain that feels the wind, not the wind itself. You can feel the fire of rage, but you know that you are the vast, cool stone that contains the fire. This is not a metaphor. It is a felt reality you can cultivate. It is the key to navigating the inevitable earthquakes of life. A sudden illness, the loss of a job, the end of a relationship. When the ground of your familiar life begins to shake, the surface of the mind will and should react with fear and grief. This is the weather. To deny these feelings is a form of violence against yourself. The mountain does not pretend the blizzard isn't happening. It feels the full force of the cold and the wind, but it does so from a place of unshakable stability. The practice is to feel the fear in your body, to allow the tears of grief to flow, but to simultaneously stay connected to that deep, silent, mountain-like presence within you. This is the source of your resilience. From this place of core stability, you can make wise decisions. You can ask for help. You can endure the storm without being shattered by it, because a fundamental part of you knows that you are the mountain, and the earthquake will pass. You can feel the stability right now. Wherever you are, feel the points of contact your body is making with the surface beneath it. Feel the subtle but constant pull of gravity, holding you here, rooting you to the earth. Imagine your spine is the mountain's central peak, strong and upright. Imagine your whole body has the solid, dense stillness of a mountain. Feel your own physical presence as an anchor in this present moment. Now, bring to mind a small, recent worry, a light wind. As you feel the familiar stirrings of that anxiety, keep most of your attention on the feeling of being a mountain. Let the anxious thoughts be the wind that blows across your slopes. You do not need to stop the wind. Just remain the mountain. notice that you can hold the anxiety. The anxiety is happening within you, but it is not the totality of you. You are the vast, stable space that contains it. You cannot control the tectonic plates of the world. The earthquakes will come. You cannot command the weather on the surface of your own mind. The storms will rage, but you can discover, befriend, and learn to abide in the part of you that is older and deeper than any earthquake, and vaster than any storm. Your peace is not found in a life without turmoil, but in discovering the indestructible mountain of your own being. We began this journey together with the image of an uninvited guest, a fearsome visitor pounding at the door of your inner home. We have learned to observe this visitor, to see it as the changing weather of the mind. We have learned that its power is magnified in the small teacup of the ego, and that it is futile to push against the river of its arrival. We learn to stop shooting the second arrow of our own narrative at it, to see the ghostly origins of its fear, and to find our footing in the unshakable mountain of our own being. And now, we are ready for the final, most profound, and most transformative step in our relationship with this visitor. We are ready to stop being a frightened homeowner and to become the wisest of hosts. We are ready to offer the welcome that disarms. The great Sufi poet and mystic Rumi told a story that serves as a timeless teaching. He said that the human being is a guest house. Every morning, there is a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. The teaching, he said, is to welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Even then, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is the practice of radical acceptance, taken to its ultimate conclusion. For most of this journey, even in our most mindful moments, there can be a subtle, hidden agenda. We observe our anxiety. We sit with it like a mountain, but secretly, we are doing it so that the feeling will finally go away. Our acceptance is conditional. It is a strategy. But the visitor of anxiety is wise to this. It feels our subtle rejection, our desire for it to leave, and so it stays, its work not yet done. The practice of the welcome is the complete and total surrender of this agenda. It is the dropping of all resistance, all strategy. It is to greet your deepest fear not as a problem to be solved, but as an honored guest who has traveled a long way to bring you a message. This welcome is what finally and truly disarms the guest. The power of anxiety is derived almost entirely from our struggle with it. It is a creature that feeds on our resistance. When you tense your body against it, you are feeding it. When you distract yourself from it, you are feeding it. When you hate it for being there, you are feeding it a feast. The moment you stop fighting, the moment you open the door of your being completely and say, "Welcome," the visitor has nothing to push against. Its source of power is cut off. It stands in the open doorway of your acceptance, and in the light of your welcome, it begins to transform. Consider the terrifying experience of a panic attack. The heart pounds, the world seems to tilt, the breath grows short, and the mind screams that you are dying or losing control. In this moment, the body's instinct is to fight for its life, to tense every muscle, to desperately try to make the feeling stop. This resistance is like throwing gasoline on a fire. It is the second, third, and 100th arrow of suffering, the terror of being terrified. The practice of the welcome, as radical and counterintuitive as it sounds, is the only true path to peace in that moment. It is the practice of softening your body when every cell is screaming at you to tighten. It is the practice of breathing into the heart of the fear instead of away from it. It is the practice of speaking to the panic with a quiet, internal voice of unconditional love. Hello, panic. I feel you. You are here. You are welcome. You can stay as long as you need to. I will not fight you anymore. This is not a passive surrender to misery. It is an act of supreme courage. It is the fearlessness to feel what is already here. In this welcoming, you are not adding the fuel of your resistance to the fire. The fear of the fear dissolves, and the raw, primal energy of the panic, no longer being fed, can finally move through you, run its course, and burn itself out, often much more quickly than if you had struggled against it. So this is the practice. When you feel the familiar guest of anxiety arrive, as a knot in your stomach, a tightness in your throat, a cascade of worried thoughts, change your greeting. Instead of meeting it with the old habit of fear and rejection, meet it with the new habit of welcome. Open the door. Ah, anxiety, it is you again. I see you. Welcome. Come in and have some tea. You must be tired from your journey. Tell me, what message have you brought for me today? You are not welcoming the anxiety because you like the feeling. You are welcoming it because you have come to understand that it is a frightened part of you, a lost child, a messenger from your own soul that is simply asking for love. The visitor was never your enemy. Your resistance to the visitor was the entire war. By learning to greet every aspect of your experience, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, with this open, spacious, and loving welcome, you discover a peace that is not dependent on feeling good. It is a peace that is rooted in the fearlessness to feel everything. The guest, finally seen, finally held, and finally welcomed, can at last deliver its gift and find its own rest in a house that is no longer a fortress, but a home. When you practice the radical welcome, when you open the door of your being so completely that even your deepest fear is invited in for tea, a strange and wonderful alchemy begins. The longer you sit with your guest, the more you begin to notice something remarkable. The very distinction between you, the host, and anxiety, the visitor, starts to soften. The boundary that once seemed so solid and real begins to blur and dissolve. You realize you are not a solid entity entertaining a separate feeling. You are both made of the same substance, the ever-changing fabric of awareness. The host and the guest are one. This is the doorway to the final freedom, the freedom of dissolving into the landscape. There is a story of a master artist who spent his entire life trying to paint the essence of a single, great mountain. For years, he applied his technical skill. He studied the mountain's anatomy, the way the light struck its ridges, the precise colors of its stone. His paintings were flawless in their accuracy, masterpieces of technique, yet they felt lifeless. They were perfect pictures of a mountain, but they did not hold the mountain spirit. frustrated. The painter one day put down all his brushes. He built a small hut at the foot of the mountain and simply sat before it. For days and weeks, he did nothing but observe. He breathed when the wind breathed through the pines. He felt the warmth of the sun on the rock as if it were his own skin. He felt the cold of the night deep in his own bones. He let go of the idea of painter and mountain. The separation dissolved. He became the mountain. One morning, he rose as if from a dream, returned to his canvas, and picked up his brush. His hand moved with a new kind of intelligence, a force that seemed to come from the earth itself. He did not paint a picture of the mountain. He allowed the mountain to express itself through him. The result was a work of art that pulsed with life, a painting that was not merely an image, but an experience. He had to lose himself to truly find his art. Our entire life is built upon the illusion of a painter separate from the mountain. We feel that there is an I, a subject, a thinker, a feeler, who resides somewhere behind the eyes, looking out at a separate world of objects. There is me, and there is my anxiety, me and my joy, me and the world. This fundamental subject-object split, created and sustained by language and thought, is the root of all our loneliness and alienation. It is the core illusion of a separate self. The ultimate realization pointed to by the great wisdom traditions is that this central observer, this I in the middle of it all, is a ghost. It is a thought that thinks itself, but it has no solid, independent reality. There is no thinker, only the process of thinking. There is no feeler, only the dynamic flow of feeling. There is no you who is anxious. There is only the unified, seamless, momentary experience of anxiousness happening. The separate self is a mirage, and when that mirage dissolves, what is left? Everything, the entire landscape. You are not the lonely painter, struggling to capture the world. You are the entire canvas, the paint, the mountain, the sky, and the light. You have had tastes of this truth throughout your life, even if you did not name them. Modern psychology calls it a flow state. It is the experience of a musician so absorbed in playing that she ceases to be a person playing music and becomes the music itself. It is the athlete in the zone, where there is no thought, only the perfect, unfolding intelligence of the body in motion. It is the gardener who looks up from her work to find that hours have passed in what felt like minutes, because the I who counts the minutes had disappeared. In these moments of deep absorption, the self-conscious, monitoring ego goes quiet, and the boundary between the doer and the doing dissolves. These are not rare peak experiences, but glimpses of our most natural state of being, a state of unified, flowing presence. This is something you can touch, right here. Feel the breath as it moves in and out of your body. Now, gently let go of the idea that you are breathing. Can you feel it in a different way? Simply as breathing happening. The universe, the air, the landscape is breathing through this body. There is no separate breather in charge. Now, listen to the sounds around you. Let go of the idea of a listener inside your head who is hearing the sounds. Can you experience it as just hearing happening? The sounds are appearing effortlessly in the vast field of awareness that you are. This is the final letting go. First, we let go of our attachment to things, Then, we let go of our resistance to feelings. And finally, we let go of the I who was doing all the letting go. It is the ultimate relief, the great burden of being a separate self, a self that must be protected, defended, improved, and healed, is finally laid down. And in its place is not a void, but the luminous, intelligent, and deeply peaceful dance of life itself. You do not need to find your peace within the landscape. You are the landscape, and its nature is peace. And so, the separate self, the painter who struggles to capture the mountain, dissolves. The lonely host, standing guard at the door of the inner home, dissolves. The frightened traveler, trying to push the river, dissolves. And what is left when the illusion of the separate self fades away? What remains when the seeker of peace finally gives up the search? What is here, now, in this moment? There is only the landscape, the vast, open, silent, and loving expanse of what is. And the nature of this landscape, its deepest and most intimate quality, is that of the sky. You are not the cloud. You have never been the cloud. You are the sky. The visitor of anxiety that once seemed so terrifying is nothing more than a dark storm cloud, passing through the vastness of your being. The grief you have felt is a gentle, cleansing rain. The moments of joy are the brilliant, warm rays of the sun. The thoughts that race through your mind are the birds that fly across your expanse, leaving no trace. The sky, your true nature, is not affected by any of it. The sky does not prefer the sun to the rain. It does not judge the storm cloud or cling to the clear day. It holds all of it, all of the ever-changing weather of life, in a boundless, unconditional, and peaceful embrace. The mountain we spoke of is simply the way the sky feels when it is touching the earth, grounded, solid, stable. The guest house is the sky's infinite hospitality, its capacity to welcome every single thing that arises without exception. The crying inner child is a small cloud of rain, and you, the sky, receive its tears with a deep, loving tenderness, knowing that this too shall pass, and that the rain only nourishes the earth below. All the lessons, all the parables, were simply different ways of pointing you back to this one. Fundamental truth. You are the space in which everything happens, and that space is inherently, eternally peaceful. There is nowhere left to go now. There is nothing left to fix, nothing to achieve, nothing to understand. The search is over. You have not been learning a new set of skills, but simply remembering the truth of what you have always been. For years you have identified with the passing clouds, believing yourself to be fragile, temporary, and vulnerable to the weather. Now, you can finally rest in the truth of your own boundless nature. Rest as the sky. Feel the infinite space that you are. It has no edges, no center, no boundary. It is utterly open, utterly free. All the stories of your life, all the memories, all the hopes and fears, they are just small clouds, drifting through this immense expanse. Let them drift. You do not need to manage them. You do not need to change them. You do not even need to watch them anymore. Simply rest as the sky that allows them to be. The need to protect yourself can dissolve now. The sky needs no protection. The need to prove yourself can fall away. The sky has nothing to prove. The need to be seen, to be validated, to be loved by an outside source can gently fade. The sky is already whole, complete, and held in the loving embrace of its own being. Allow your body to soften into this knowing. Allow the breath to breathe itself. There is nothing for you to do. The journey is complete. The peace you were searching for was never lost. It was simply obscured by the clouds of your own thinking. And now, the clouds are parting. Or perhaps you have just realized that you are not the clouds at all, but the vast, clear, and silent sky that was always here, waiting patiently for you to come home. Rest now. Rest in the peace of your own true nature. Let go of everything. Let go of the story. Let go of the striving. Let go of the listener who is hearing these words. And just be the silence that remains. The search is over. Welcome home.